Last week, we counted down the best and worst games from the Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, and King of Fighters franchises. That was a whole bunch of fun, but more than a few people asked, what Electronic Gaming Monthly think about the other SNK fighters like Samurai Shodown, World Heroes, and The Last Blade? How did those games compare to the King of Fighters? As it turns out, SNK reviewed a total of 20 games in the Samurai Shodown, Last Blade, and World Heroes franchises. This includes most of the mainline games, a bunch of the downgraded 16-bit ports, and even a couple of versions on handheld systems. Sure, there are a few games missing here and there, I suppose, but I think you're going to agree that we have a fun list with a lot of amazing games to talk about. And best of all, we're going to end this episode by combining this week's countdown with the one that we had last week to see the full list of SNK fighting games. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet, because right now what we're going to do is count down the best and worst Samurai Shodown, Last Blade, and World Heroes games based on Electronic Gaming Monthly's own words and scores. There's no editorializing here, we're just going to focus on what the critics said back when these games first came out. So go and grab your favorite sword, because this is what happens when EGM ranks Samurai Shodown, The Last Blade, and World Heroes.
Kiriste Gomen no Kenjutsu Action, Super Famicom, Samurai Spirits.
Takala!
Alright, we're gonna kick things off with number 20, Samurai Shodown Warrior's Rage on the PlayStation. Samurai Shodown Warrior's Rage is yet another 3D SNK title that just should never have been. It's a huge disgrace to the Samurai Shodown name, and I can't think of any reason why somebody ought to pick it up. The graphics are weak and lack detail, the sounds are average, and the story is simply tolerable. And when it comes to the gameplay, things don't get any better. There's an overall lack of polish that really hinders the fights. Animations are often jerky, and the control feels loose. Also, to make things more dramatic, the game pauses every time the combatant loses one of the 3 sections of their life bar. This just breaks up the flow a match might have had. Seriously, who would want this in a fighting game? Number 19, World Heroes on the Genesis. The Super Nintendo version was a good Neo Geo reproduction, but this one completely misses. The action is incredibly slow and a bit choppy, and the voices are horrendous. All the fighters are still here, but the fun isn't. Number 18, Samurai Shodown V on the Xbox. Samurai Shodown V doesn't just look like its decade-old prequels, much of it is its decade-old prequels, with graphics ripped directly from the earlier games. I'd complain more about the recycling if the few characters and backgrounds they did add weren't such ugly, uninspired piles of pixels. Still, I can't deny that the gameplay, while uneven and hardly imaginative, can be fun in the right matchup. Number 17, World Heroes on the Super Nintendo. Is this supposed to be a fighting game or just another attempt to capitalize on Street Fighter II's success? While the graphics and sounds are okay, the game really takes a dive in gameplay. The moves are nothing special, and they don't animate very well. The pace of each fight is slow as molasses. After a while, I don't even want to finish a fight. I don't know about you, but you won't find me waiting in line for this one. Number 16, The Last Blade 2 Heart of the Samurai on the Dreamcast. One of the best fighting games on the Neo Geo back in the late 90s, Last Blade 2 is an excellent compromise between old-school SNK fighters and faster-paced, more fantastic Capcom titles on the Dreamcast today. In typical SNK fashion, the dated yet endearing gameplay features a simple parrying system and is focused on close-range attacks rather than repeated projectile tossing. What I really like about Last Blade 2 is the overall style and variety in the characters. It's very much like Samurai Shodown. If you don't care much for flowery presentation, you probably won't get into Last Blade 2 because it's just not as deep as the modern 2D and 3D fighters. Number 15, Samurai Shodown III on the Neo Geo. I've been a big fan of this series, but this game just plain overwhelmed me. Not only is there a huge conglomeration of characters, but there are also alter egos that play differently as well. As a result, the graphics seem to be compromised with fewer colors than before. Samurai Shodown 3 plays well, but there are just too many of those moves that require impossible joystick motions. I have mixed feelings about this game. I like what it has, but wasn't impressed. Number 14, Samurai Shodown on the Game Boy. A very good portable version of the Neo Geo arcade smash. Almost everything's here, the fighters, the moves, and the look. This one seemed a lot more fun on the Super Game Boy than on the small screen, but nonetheless, fans of the game who are on the go will not be disappointed with this one. Number 13, World Heroes 2 on the Super Nintendo. The Neo Geo madness continues with yet another excellent conversion of an arcade game to the Super Nintendo platform. One advantage to this version is the ability to play as the boss characters. The speed setting is also a plus, and the tug-of-war survival matches have been retained from the arcade. Some moves could have used a bit more animation. Overall, it's a faithful translation. Number 12, Samurai Shodown on the Super Nintendo. A very earnest home version of the arcade smash that stays pretty faithful to the original material. Obviously, some will be disappointed that the scaling isn't in this version, and the characters could have been a little bigger. But for an adaptation of a Neo Geo title, this one does a very good job. Number 11, Samurai Shodown on the Sega CD. It's the game that will not die. Samurai Shodown on the Sega CD is a solid fighting game, but not without some flaws. The first and major one is the character voices. They have too much of a muffled echo to them, not something you'd want to hear during a good battle. The control is perfect, and the music is very good. All the special moves have been included as well. If you're just dying for a new fighting game, then Samurai Shodown shouldn't disappoint you.
SNK.
ゲームをしよう。
いいですが、玲子ですか？
もしもし。
ネオジオ CD 新登場。ゲームをしよう。ネオジオ CD 新登場。
SNK.
And we're back with number 10, Samurai Shodown on the 3DO. A very faithful version of the arcade fighter, the only drawback being the voices for some of the characters aren't exactly right. The scaling effect is well done with easy execution of the moves. Number 9, World Heroes 2 Jet on the Game Boy. Wow! I have to hand it to Takara, you really blew old Sushi away. I've never really been big on the countless limitations of the Game Boy, but somehow they were able to put in all the moves and simply incredible control. I couldn't believe a fighting game would ever work on a portable, but this one does. Sure, the sounds are typical Game Boy and the graphics are simple, but it plays and controls better than some 16-bit titles. Hats off for this title, it's a great reproduction of the Neo Geo version. Number 8, Samurai Shodown IV, Amakusa's Revenge on the Neo Geo. I'm starting to get as tired of the 2D fighting scene as I am the Doom clone. Outside of the Street Fighter games, everything else seems to lack that certain luster. Samurai Shodown IV is the best Neo Geo fighting there is. better than the Fatal Furies, better than the King of Fighters. Samurai Shodown IV looks great. The moves are clean and flashy, just like I like my women. The characters are animated better than any other Neo Geo game, which is a pleasant change. Plenty of technique and a wide variety of warriors makes this a truly great fighting game. Don't pass this by at the arcade. Number 7, World Heroes 2 on the Neo Geo. Neo Geo continues to astound. This is a great fighting game with enough fighters to keep one's interest. My favorite is the Witch Doctor Mudman. The deathmatch mode is very innovative. This game will occupy 2 players for days just with its action. Some characters are hard to control, but at least you have a choice. Number 6, Samurai Shodown on the Genesis. For those wanting bigger fighters than those in the Super Nintendo version, look no further. The scaling is out, but the graphics are very close to the Neo Geo version, with the omission of the fighter Earthquake. There is some slowdown and the voices are poor, but the moves are easy to execute and earnest translation. Number 5, The Last Blade on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. The Neo Geo Pocket Color is quickly becoming the system of choice for 2D fighting fans. It always amazes me just how much depth SNK is able to give these little handheld fighters, especially only having 2 buttons to work with. Last Blade uses a point system, meaning that you gain points after accomplishing certain things that will unlock extra modes. The game has more in common with Samurai Shodown than any other Neo Geo Pocket Color fighter as far as the feel and the battle system go. So if you long for the breakneck speed of SNK vs. Capcom, you might not be satisfied. Overall, it's another solid Neo Geo Pocket Color fighter. Number 4, World Heroes 2 Jet on the Neo Geo. I bought World Heroes 2 and thought it was a good game. Now, after playing this remake, I'm about to toss that old one out. This card has been retooled to play better and have more moves. There are so many cool additions, it's hard to describe how much is new. I like the many taunts and the fake dizzies. The 2 new characters are a bit too powerful though. This is one to get if you have a Neo Geo. Number 3, World Heroes Perfect on the Neo Geo. Hey, haven't I played this game before? World Heroes Perfect looks just like the previous version of the game that bears its name, aside from the obvious background differences. The only changes that really make a difference are in the way the game plays. There are now more offensive and defensive ways to play, opening up all new ways to attack and conquer. Don't be dismayed if you think this game isn't any different. It's a better game and worthy of plugging quarters into. Number 2, Samurai Shodown on the Neo Geo. Forget Fatal Fury 2 and World Heroes 2, because Samurai Shodown has arrived. The graphics are better than any other fighter on the Neo Geo, with superb sound effects and voices. The many characters to fight with have some of the most creative attacks. You can also lose your weapons and then gain them back. Awesome! And finally, at number 1, Samurai Shodown II on the Neo Geo. Not only have my expectations for Samurai Shodown II been met, but they've been surpassed. SNK has taken their best game to a higher plane. Samurai Shodown II is loaded with cool new features. New fighters, stunning backgrounds for every character, and best of all, the gameplay is superb! With the new moves, there's a ton of new ways to attack. Samurai Shodown 2 is a diamond in the rough for fighting games.
Shock Neo Geo.
なんと新キャラクター2人を加えてさらにパワーアップ目が離せないスーパーバトルワールドヒーローズ2ジェット
頑張れマットさん
ADK.
Hey, thanks for watching me count down these classic reviews. You know, I wasn't intending to do a second SNK episode back to back, but it only makes sense. I mean, I couldn't leave Samurai Shodown out in the cold now, could I? If you liked what you saw here today, then you'll be happy to know that we post a new one of these almost every week. In fact, we have a whole playlist where we have more than 70 of these EGM Ranks episodes. We cover pretty much every major franchise that you can think of. So, you know, give it a binge when you have a free afternoon. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is SNK's best fighting game? I mean, it doesn't have to be one from these franchises, but for me, personally, it definitely would be. I'm partial to Samurai Shodown II. It's just SNK at their absolute best, and I love that it doesn't look or feel like any other 2D fighting game on the market. Especially the stuff that was coming from Capcom at the time. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back later this week with a Soul Reaver themed review crew episode, as well as a review for Skim. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,